Hello, this is Kwavi, life coach for women 50 and over, and the creator of Flourish, an online community for women 50 and over. How are you? How's it going? All right, today I'm going to talk about an experience that probably some of you have encountered lately, maybe not, maybe yes, no, but I think it's important to talk about. So, I came to this country in the 90s, in the early 90s. And I remember when I stepped into this country, and bear in mind, I came from England, and prior to that, I was in Nigeria. So it was interesting. As soon as I set foot in this country, one of the things I noticed that I got asked constantly is, "Oh, you have an accent. Where are you from?" You know, and it was interesting to me because prior to that, I lived in England. Never heard that question. Probably don't even remember hearing that, being asked that question. But that was something that I was always asked. And it was really interesting because I thought, because to me, this is me, I believe everyone has an accent. When I was in college, I worked at Harrods. And Harrods is one of those stores where you get people coming from all over the world. And so everyone has, you encounter different people. And it never occurred to me to ask anybody, "Oh, where where you from? Where's that accent from?" Or no, there's never, because everyone has an accent. In the UK, depending on where you live, you're from Liverpool, from Manchester, from London, very different accents. Cockney accent, they have all the different ones, but I never really thought anything of it. But it's interesting in this country, in the US, you constantly ask that question. And I'm going to be honest with you, it made me feel unwelcome being asked that question. That's my perception. That's how I took it. Because it almost was as if to say, "You're not from here. Okay, so you're over there and we're over here." And that's how I interpreted it. But then when I would have discussions like in the workplace, and I'd say, "Well, you have an accent too." I'm going to be honest with you. Do you know that most of them said no, they don't? And I was like, "Really? Like, why do you think that you don't have one?" And it's interesting they would say that because when I worked at Harrods and Americans would come in, my first thing is, oh, when I would hear them speak, I'd say, "Oh, that's someone with an American accent." But I would not like ask them that question, but I would, just kind of internalize that within me. So I found it very interesting that when I moved to this country and I would have that discussion with certain people, they'd say, "Oh, no, they don't." And so if you're listening to this, and you're American, do you honestly believe you don't have an accent? I mean, or you just think that yours is normal and everyone else has one? Because I find that very interesting. Because quite frankly, you all have an accent. We all have accents because depending on where we're from or where we grew up, we speak in a certain way. That's what kind of distinguishes you from the other person. A New York accent is very different from a Southern accent. Someone who lives in the South is very different from someone who lives in California. They're all different accents. So I found it interesting that, okay, I had an accent, but they didn't. And I was like, "But we all do." And they were like, "No." I was like, okay, this was fascinating to me. I just thought that was because it almost seems as if, yeah, we have an accent, but your accent is different. So they're different levels. I just found it so intriguing to find out. And I know for me, because I was very comfortable with who I wasn't going to let that stop me from doing what I needed to do. I was like, I am going to be me. I'm going to go after what I want, and I'm not going to let that stop me. But I do know that sometimes that can be a hindrance if you're an immigrant. So, in other words, if you're someone who comes from a different country and moves to this country, sometimes that can be a hindrance because I have heard people say things like, "Well, oh, you probably don't understand me because I have an accent." I'm like, "No, I understood you." You know, or they'll make apologies for their accent. I'm like, that is part of what makes you unique. That is your selling point. Don't downplay that. Everyone doesn't have to speak in the same way. No, it's not necessary. No. What makes you unique is what makes you different. And that is not to say that's not a bad thing. Don't let people think. I've heard so many people do that. Like I've had, friends from other European countries, or some from other countries in South America, and they'll say things like, "Oh, because of my," like, no, your accent is your selling point. That's what makes you unique. That's what makes you different. Don't let anyone else make you feel less than because of your accent. We all have it. It's, we all have accents. We all do, because no one speaks the same way. No. But I thought that was interesting. And it brought me to thinking about this feeling of being welcomed, because I'll tell you that constant asking did not make me feel welcome. It made me feel like, okay, you're there and I'm here. But I didn't let it stop me. I didn't. I was like, okay, you know what? They want to go there, and I'm like, okay. And sometimes it's so interesting when people say, "Where are you from?" I have to kind of think quickly. I'm like, okay, do they want to know where I'm from because I have an accent, or do they want to know where I live? And a few times I'll say Nigeria, and they're like, "No, no, no. Where do you live?" I'm like, okay, I live in Atlanta. And so it's so interesting because you just don't know where people are coming from when they ask that question. So really, seriously, if you are listening to this, I really want to hear your viewpoint. Do you really think that people who live in America do not have an accent and everyone else does? Like, what is your take on that? Like, I'd really love to hear that. But the question I have is, and before I go into that question, I want to ask you how you have you ever been in a space where you just went in there and you just felt like, wow, these are my people. They get me. I'm like, ooh, you just feel like it's almost like they've wrapped you with a like a warm blanket, and you just feel like these are my people. They get me. They know me. Has that ever happened to you? Wait. I and it's an amazing feeling to get that, where you don't have to say anything. You look at the person like, I see you. You see me. Type. You don't have to say anything. Oh, listen, that feeling is priceless. And for me, even more so, being a black female, it just, it warmed my heart to no end. So I want to know where you just walked into somewhere and you were like, oh, don't have to say a word. These people get me. They know me. That's how I felt last week. But I know that I am, what I'm up to, why I'm there. And even with that, sometimes you don't get the welcome you want. And, you make it work, because that's what we do. We make it work. But last week, didn't have to do any of that. None of that. Pure welcome. And so for me, that's one of the reasons why I created my online community called welcomed. That's how I made it, what I made it mean. But